Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you're watching 6th part of What If Naruto Was Denied to be a ninja but still overpowered. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
If Zabuza Momochi, the blood mist demon, could send Naruto a big kiss, he wouldn't think twice about it. He went to Kiriagakure and met the leader of the rebels, Mei Terumi. She knew him right away. The first thing she noticed about him was that he was wearing a Wave Junin uniform. Haku was also wearing a Wave uniform, but it was the version for Chunin Hunter ninjas. She wondered if he was still a Kiri ninja, even though he was missing a ninja. He told her that he wasn't and that he now worked full-time for Wave Country. Then, he set up a formal conversation between Mei and Daku, who was there as Naruto's representative. The woman was so desperate that she would have taken help from anyone, no matter how scary they looked. However, she had to admit that the dark shadow's smell was very enticing. Mei had agreed to make a military and trading alliance with Wave and the rest of the village alliance, but only if the small village country helped free Mist. Daku had stressed that he, Zabuza, and Haku had everything they needed to kill the Three Tails Jinchuriki. Mei, who was always curious, asked him why he was so sure of his strength. Daku told her that his master was a seal master who was much more skilled than the Sanin's Jiraiya. That had made her decide. Even though Daku said he was just watching the fight between Zabuza and Yagura in case anything went wrong. On the same day, a high-ranking rank Wave swordsman threw an explosive tag that Naruto had given him after Star joined the Wave Shinobi system and was still being watched. The tag had a lot of power but could be controlled. The tag had gotten stuck on the building and blown up the top half, which was where the Mizukage's office was. He made his point clear right away, so that's not a surprise. The S-rank Cage didn't like being stopped in the middle of his morning routine of stretching. The way the fight went wasn't what Zabuza had hoped for. The Mizukage showed him why he was a whole rank better than him by beating him to a bloody pulp, but not without putting in a lot of work. Zabuza was happy that he had given his opponent bumps and cuts. Then, just as Yagura was about to drop his hook staff on his head to crush it, he started his backup plan. One seal was part of that plan. The high seal of the chakra. He used all the strength he still had and rolled away from the blow that shook the earth. He flipped away and put his head cleaver in its sheath on his back while pushing chakra into the seal on his neck. Everyone could see a map of his tenketsu on his body, starting at his spider-webbed neck and going down to his fingers and toes. He put his palms together in a monkey hand seal, which Naruto had seen gave him better control over the stronger chakra the seal created. The water around him, which was red from all the water jutsu the two fighters had been using, rose up 3 times his height and turned blood red. The water around Yagura also turned red, leaking out from Zabuza's feet. Behind him, the water swirled into a small cyclone, and 2 sharp arms shot out of the sides. Zabuza's face stayed blank the whole time. The red cyclone monster was made from a combination of nature chakra and Zabuza's chakra. Zabuza had been practicing this technique for months after going on solo missions outside of Wave, mostly to water country or swamp country. It wasn't easy to hold up, but it did what it was meant to do. The swordsman went through a series of hand seals and then pushed his right palm forward in a ram hand seal. Water release. Drilling water dragons, he said. The red cyclone raised both of its arms to the sky, and red spinning dragons of death shot out of the water and flew towards the surprised Mizukage. Mei, who was watching from the sidelines, couldn't believe that Zabuza was still standing after using so much chakra. Haku stayed mostly calm as he watched the fight through his Wave Hunter ninja mask. He had already decided that Zabuza should have the fight all to himself, but he still wanted to show everyone what his own chakra high seal could do. The Terumi muttered, "How is he still fighting?" As they watched the demon of the bloody mist stay put as red mini-cyclones erupted from the ground and the swarm of drilling dragons kept shooting at Yagura and went after the Mizukage. Zabuza didn't look the least bit tired, even though he was using a lot of chakra. The smaller cyclones worked together to throw the leader of the mist off balance with their deadly drilling blows and the fact that they knew where each other was even when they didn't look. Zabuza has done a lot of training for this day, including practicing with the chakra high seal. Is there a chance I could get one? Naruto-sama only gives the seal to the people he trusts the most. Well, that's too bad, the woman said, but then she looked at the dark shadow and thought, or, you can put in a good word for us. No. She flicked her eyes and huffed in frustration when he didn't even look at her. Haku laughed and said, Naruto-sama is very careful about who he hangs out with. If you show him in Wave Country that you have good intentions, he might give you a chakra high seal. He can't resist my feminine charm, she said, tossing her hair to the side. Ao, who was standing guard behind her with Chojuro, rolled his eye in frustration. Most of the time, Naruto-sama is like a rock. Nothing, not even you, Mei-sama, can get to him. He had worked for Naruto for a year and a half, so he knew this to be true. Yagura was trying as hard as he could to avoid the dragon drills and red water cyclones. Hitting the cyclones with his hook staff only worked for a minute before they reformed and became twice as strong. You can see how this would be frustrating for the person who had been winning. Yagura spun around, destroying the cyclones around him, and told Beast Chakra to flow through his body. Zabuza gave a small smirk when he saw this, and the cyclone monster attached a water tentacle to his back. Using Naruto's Jinchuriki containment seal, the chakra creation reached out towards Yagura and hit him in the chest just as he was about to change into his three tails form. Out of the center of the seal came iron chains that wrapped around the man. They sucked his chakra out and used it to make the chains around him thicker and tighter. In shock, the Mizukage let go of his staff and fell backwards. He was still a human, but he was getting weaker at a scary rate. Naruto's five-tailed form could be held down by the Jinchuriki containment seal, so he was pretty sure it could hold the three tails as well. From then on, the fighting area was back in order, and everything went smoothly, except for the noise made by the red cyclones spinning behind Zabuza. The Wave Junin told the original red cyclones drill-like arms to drill through Yagura and get around the containment seal. Being a Jinchuriki was one thing, but being a Jinchuriki with less power was something else. Yagura, who was known as the Bloody Mizukage, died from his wounds. Naruto pinched his nose bridge and sighed, "Why me? What's up?" It didn't help that Kyuubi was making loud kissing sounds and giggling inside him, he said. He opened his bright blue eyes and looked at the small group of sand people sitting in the Hokage's office. Their guards, Gaara, Kankuro, and Temari, stood in front of the office. Tsunade laughed at Naruto's expression when the sand siblings told him why they were coming. "I'm sorry, Gaara Dono, but I will have to decline," he said. The sand user asked, "May I ask why?" The red-headed young village leader raised an eyebrow at him and then glanced at his sister out of the corner of his eye. Temari was a pretty girl who was known as the Sand Flower for her beauty and grace. Any man would have been happy to court her. Except, it seemed, Naruto. The girl didn't take his answer as well as her siblings might have thought. She didn't show any emotion on her face, but she gripped her chair tightly and stared at Naruto, who wasn't even looking at her. "I have too much going on right now to be interested in dating anyone." Gaara started to answer, but Temari said, "So you're saying I'm not worth the trouble?" The puppet master, Kankuro, shifted in his seat and muttered, "Uh-oh." He silently signaled to his cage brother to hold up, knowing that the boy didn't know the little signs that Temari was angry, and if Temari was angry, no one should bother her. Never. Naruto, however, didn't pay attention to the warnings. "I know what's most important to me. Wave comes before everything, even marriage." After hearing this, Tsunade let out a quiet sigh and lowered her head a bit. She then said, "Now you've done it." "Wave leader be damned," Temari said to herself as she stood up and walked over to Naruto's chair. "Are you telling me that you won't even try to fit me and my needs into your busy schedule? You won't even try?" "I'm sorry, but no," he said with a sorry smile, which made Temari's heart weaken a little, but she didn't give up. "You're a nice girl, and I'm sure you'd make a great wife, but I need to focus on making my village stronger," he added. She sighed in disappointment, nodded sadly, and went back to her seat. "I understand," she said. Everyone else in the room let out a sigh of relief. Temari's attack on Naruto had not led to a war. Temari could see where Naruto was coming from. Wave was a slum before he cleaned it up, but now it was a ninja village with a growing economy and a lot of connections. "We'll have to tear up the marriage contract." At this point, Naruto realized how much what he had said to her had affected her. She had been telling herself that she was going to get married to someone, and she had already given up hope that she could change her mind. She had to convince herself that she was going to be a wife no matter what, and she might even come to love him. But now the first person she could ever see herself with had turned her down. It wasn't a good feeling. "Let's make a deal where we both benefit," Gaara Dono, the sand user who had been sad, heard this and nodded. The rules they set were similar to Konoha's, but the sand had a little more space to move around in wave, so any of their ninja who wanted to could get a long-term guest tattoo. Konoha ninja could only stay for up to 1 month before they had to leave. If they needed to stay longer, they had to meet with the people in charge of giving visitors tattoos. This change sparked a small fire in Temari. She clenched her fists on her lap and looked determined. Only Naruto heard her say, "I'll have a chance to make him like me again," but he ignored it in his mind because her happy trade with Wave had already started. Just like with the Konoha alliance, he put it on a scroll so he could reach Wave and send it to the village leaders he was fully allied with. The alliance was to be kept safe by Yumi of Hidden Chill, since most villages were afraid to attack people who lived so far into the snow and were also fully able to fight there. He had already made what he called his communication seal and given it to the other 5 villages. 1 week later, 6 a.m. Naruto had always known that his metabolism worked faster than that of any other person he knew. This meant that even if he ate as much food as a full-grown cow, he would burn off the calories he had eaten in half a day. It was almost too late for his body to get back the vitamins and minerals it needed, but he could thank his mysterious godmother, Mikoto Uchiha, for buying him food from the time he was 4 until he was 9. Every day, his bones and muscles got stronger and tighter, so he had to stretch a lot before he could leave his flat, or moving around would be harder on him than it should be. This meant that he was growing taller faster than anyone else his age. He was 2 feet taller than Sasuke and 3.5 feet taller than Hinata at that moment. His students had already come to terms with the fact that they would have to physically and mentally look up to their teacher if they wanted to learn from him. Naruto gave his Konoha students, who were standing straight in front of him, a small smile. He looked at each one with a critical eye and noticed their physical and mental growth. Yakumo had the right amount of meat on her bones for a 10-year-old girl. Her terrible muscle strength had grown to the point where she could at least keep up with a regular strength student at the academy. Her fists and sandaled feet were tightly wrapped in white bandages to cover the bruises she got from punching and kicking the training dummies and sparring with Hinata and Sasuke. She was wearing a calf-length white battle kimono with an orange sash around her waist. Her ninja-grade black trousers were visible through a slit on her right hip. Her brown hair was cut much shorter to look like Molesheim cut, who was her new idol. He had been working with her on her genjutsu drawing speed, her taijutsu in case her opponent got close, and some fuinjutsu, even though she was more focused on making up for her weak strength with raw ninjutsu using chakra from her inner beast. She told him she was going to leave the academy a year early, and he was all for it, especially when she said she wanted to specialize in spying and sneaking around. Hinata still wore her purple jacket, but it was almost always unzipped, showing her light blue midriff shirt and bandaged torso. The sleeves of her jacket covered her bandaged arms, but not her fingers. The wraps went up until they touched the top of her head. She wore a black skirt that came to about the middle of her thighs and light blue ninja-grade tights that ended just above her ankles. Since Naruto had been training her the longest, he wasn't surprised that she had come the farthest, from a weak, low-confidence girl to a strong-willed teenager. He had been teaching her to use her newfound muscle strength with her changed gentle fist taijutsu style so that she could move easier and faster on her feet and hit with the force of a train. She wasn't very good at her fuinjutsu, so he taught her how to split her chakra without seals so she could do combination ninjutsu on her own. She was doing fine. Her father wasn't happy that she was getting training from people other than her team's sensei, but he couldn't care less because Kurenai hadn't stopped their training, so there wasn't a problem. Even though he told Hinata to find a way to get along with her little sister, he also told her that if she wanted to lead the clan, she would need a good friend in the main house. He could say that Hinata would probably only need taijutsu to beat a high chunin. Kurenai Yuhi had told him that next year, her team would go to Suna for the chunin exams. Sasuke Uchiha worked like a mad boy to catch up with the rest of his classmates. Even though he had only been training with Naruto for a week, he was already lifting 100 pounds. Naruto had built on this boy's strength, his ninjutsu, by teaching him to control his fire affinity perfectly. Sasuke was then told to jog around Konoha with Naruto following him at a steady jog while he used his fire chakra to set fire to random leaves Naruto would throw at him. Then Naruto would leave him with his team sensei, but he would always think of the boy as he left. Kakashi was glad for the help because it let him focus more on Sakura and Sai. Tsunade had saved Sai's life after questioning him. The Uchiha was still wearing his usual clothes, but instead of shorts, he was wearing black ninja pants. Even with everything going on, Naruto kept training in taijutsu. He had even reached the 3rd form, which was faster than Daku had thought. The Dark Shadow had cut his original prediction in half and said Naruto would master the style in 2 months. Naruto was already a low Junin, so he couldn't rely on his hand-to-hand skills. However, his work ethic was a great help. In general, he was happy with himself and his students. He took in 2 girls who didn't have much confidence and turned them into good students and ninja. Sasuke was now much calmer than he had been at the beginning. He had set his sights on Rock Lee and said he wanted to beat him first before moving on to Iruka Amino, a teacher at the academy. The blonde boys' students were lined up in front of the gate. They were part of his farewell group, along with Kakashi, Might Guy, and Tamari, who were taking him to Wave Country. Mole was also there. He was guarding Naruto the whole time by standing behind him while wearing a mole mask with the wave symbol on the forehead. Since Root was destroyed, she had been following Naruto around like a ghost. She only spoke when Naruto asked her for or about something. Since her other arm was covered by a long sleeve, she had a tattoo of 4 red waves inside a circle on the arm that was showing. The tattoo was meant to show that she was the second in command of Dark, right after Deku. Deku was in Wave right now getting things ready for him to stay there longer. The Wave leader's other Genin team members were also there to say goodbye. Naruto decided to wear his battle uniform under the Wave leader's ceremonial cloak and wide-brimmed hat. Just the fact that he was a Junin with high S-rank skills in seals and ninjutsu scared them a little, but the fact that they knew him made them feel like he probably wasn't a bad person. The blonde smiled and waved before turning on his heels and running towards Wave with his security team. The main reason he was being accompanied by Konoha Ninja in the first place was because it was a sort of formality in case he was attacked on his way to his country. This safety measure was what stopped an attack from happening in the first place. Kisame snarled quietly as he watched the well-protected escort team rush off to Wave. The problem was that there were 2 higher-rank ninja, possibly even S-rank, with a B-rank Kanochi and 3 unranked teenagers with him. Also, Naruto could call Deku out of nowhere at any moment, leaving Rai alone to fight for her life against 2 well-known speedsters. The 3 genin didn't look like they couldn't protect Naruto as well as the new mysterious ninjas who were on either side of Naruto. Itachi told him and Rai to put off the ambush because he felt bad about it. They were outnumbered and outgunned by a lot. They had to wait a little bit longer. There were a lot of people at the party. All of the people who lived in Wave who wanted to see their leader and the Hoshi people, now called the Hoshi clan, who wanted to make a good impression on the leader were there. The only problem the Hoshi clan had was when fish merchants wouldn't sell their fish to them, or if they did so at inflated prices. This caused a small fight between the Hoshi clan and the fishers in the fish merchants section of Outer Wave. Deku had solved this problem by talking to both sides and noticing that most of the dead merchants were fish traders whose families lived among the Wave fishermen. He had told them that if they didn't want Wave to go back to the chaos it was in when Gato was in charge, they should learn that the main people who killed their loved ones are no longer alive. The main point of what he said was that they shouldn't blame the child for what the parent did. In turn, he told the Star Clan that if they ever got into trouble, they shouldn't try to solve it on their own. There are groups and people they can go to for help. Even though the tension between the clan and the fishermen was still high, no problems had been reported. Naruto, who was taller than some of the adults, smiled and waved to let everyone know that he was the leader. It might seem silly that so many people followed Naruto around the village as he went to see the buildings he had built and the ones he had fixed up. Mole and Deku had to work full-time to cover Naruto's back and stop some of his fans from jumping on him. He went to the library, talked with the head librarian, and was shown around. The library was a huge building with 4 floors that were divided by how important they were. The bookshelves almost reached to the ceiling and were set up in concentric circles, with reading areas on the outside and in the middle. There were even ladders set up for any books that were too high to reach. On the top level, which was off-limits to the public, the library had all the Uzumaki knowledge, the Namikaze clan scrolls, Hoshi scrolls that weren't clan-specific, which meant anything above a rank, his own studies in Fuinjutsu in the locked S-rank section, and copies of scrolls from Konoha's library that Deku had made. The head librarian was an old teacher's college graduate who had only been in charge for a month. The Seal Master then went to the outer and inner wave markets to open the newly built mall for business. He went to the homes for the elderly and the orphanages. He made sure to keep a real smile on his face as the orphans looked at him with wide eyes, ruffled their heads, and walked with the wave-born head matron. The short, fat woman thanked him for adding a nursery to the building and putting more money into the fund. She said that the children in her care no longer complained about having torn clothes or bland food. The crowds of Wave residents then followed him to the Hoshi clan compound in Outer Wave. When the Hoshi gatekeepers told them to stay outside, they stopped at the gate. Naruto didn't care, but he had said he would only come in with his guards. The guards at the gate didn't care, though. The young leader of the Wave met with the head of the Hoshi clan and the other elders. They talked about how the clan was doing in its new home. The clan leader told him that Wave was much more fertile than their home village, but that they would keep the peace in Wave as long as the people there did their part, too. Then, Naruto told him that he was going to destroy the pink meteorite because it was doing more harm than it should. The elders begged him not to destroy it, but instead to find a way to use its power. The Uzumaki explained that Wave already had an electrical grid and that each building had a solar power seal in case the grid ever stopped working. The two sides couldn't agree on where to put the star under Naruto's blood seal in the leader's tower. The Hoshi clan didn't like Naruto very much because he made them leave their ancestral home, but they had to give him credit for what he did for Wave because the place they stayed was better than Hoshigakure. Naruto learned that the Hoshi clan was good at releasing wind and fighting with a bow staff. They were so good at it that he could even call it a clan trait. He then went to the civilian academy, where he quickly read through each student's general report and made a few comments. Then he went to the ninja academy to meet up with Rat and talk about how the students were doing. The reformed Root Ninja turned Chunin Ninja headmaster gave him a tour of the building, telling Wave citizens to stay outside so the halls wouldn't be too crowded. Both the civilian and ninja academies were built the same way, but the ninja academy had training grounds in the back, while the civilian academy had more rooms for art and science. Rat had told him in detail that the only thing the ninja academy really needed was a well-trained fuinjutsu teacher, since Fang and Chill were not very good at the subtle art. Naruto had told him that he could tell Deku to teach a willing class of students up to level 1 of mastery. If they wanted to learn more after a year, they could be taught up to level 3. If they wanted to go further, they could go to the B-rank Fuinjutsu section of the library after they graduated. He looked at the students' year-and-a-half reports and raised an eyebrow at how they were doing. Most of them were doing about average, and only a few of them caught his attention, but one student was doing especially badly in school. He had to remember that name. He went to the leader's tower as his last stop. There, he told everyone who had gathered that they could go back to their normal lives. The head of staff, a woman named Tsunami, showed him around. Even though he was the one who designed the changes to the former Wave Daimyo's palace, he didn't know it very well, so he made sure to remember everything, from the servants' quarters on the west side to the bar on the east side. He went to his room in the tower to get some much-needed rest well after midnight. After 3 months. Naruto is now sitting at his desk, looking over the mission report that his personal assistant, Frog, had already looked over. Even though the Hoshi clan members were still acting like they didn't care and didn't follow orders right away, it wasn't as bad as it was 3 months ago, and the mission still went well. Add all the papers he had to read, approve, or reject that had to do with helping Kiri rebuild what they had lost in their war. He gave his stamp of approval so that some money could be sent to the big hidden village. The real Deku sat to his right and looked over some of the mission reports with his master, while Frog did the same thing to his left. Even though the Dark Black Ops ninja had his own desk in the room before the leader's office, Naruto told him to stay a little longer in case he needed his opinion on something related to the citizens. Then Frog got up and gently dropped a thick folder full of Ninja Academy graduates. The blonde boy sighed and rubbed his eyes. It never got easier to do papers, he thought. The Shinobi Council had already put the students on teams that worked well together, but Naruto had to check out the choices before telling the students and give each team a sensei who would test them. Naruto carefully looked at each student's strengths, weaknesses, and rate of growth. He did this in groups of 3, and then went through the list of Chill, Smoke, Fang, Waterfall, and Marsh Shinobi who were working for him. He gave each 3-person team a sensei, but he stopped when he saw a name he knew. Deku, he called, and the Dark Shadow, who was bent over, looked up at him. What do you know about Inari? I've noticed that he wants to show off too much. He once tried a high kick in a fight, but he wasn't ready for it, so he lost. How does he get along with the other kids in his class? Rat has called him a class clown, saying that he is very outgoing and loud. Naruto pursed his lips and looked at the picture of the boy with brown hair who was smiling widely. He put the boy's file down and looked at who he was paired with. He gave a small smile and told the whole team to wait. More Wave-born and Hoshi clan members were graduating from civilian schools and becoming more involved in daily life. As a result, there were a lot fewer Smoke and Marsh Shinobi working in the electrical grid and waterboard. Eventually, there was only one smoke and one marsh shinobi in each place, and they were only there to keep an eye on day-to-day operations. Most of Wave's growing police force was now made up of Hoshi people, but the Wave people were very reluctant to accept them. Wave was getting more and more independent over time. This didn't mean that the shinobi who had helped weren't allowed to stay. They could stay as long as they wanted and work wherever they wanted, even though they were no longer the most common people there. Naruto rolled his neck and read the weekly report from the power grid. The last time the power went out, it was because there was more moisture in the air, which the fisherman said meant the sea level was rising. He was really glad he had solar power backup energy seals put on the roofs of the houses, because if he hadn't, there might have been chaos everywhere. He signed off on fortifying the walls so that water wouldn't leak in where it wasn't needed, especially in Wave's Central where shops and businesses that would be destroyed by water were located. He also took the initiative to make the houses and farms in Outer Wave more water resistant than those in Wave Central. Wave also needed water to grow most of his crops. He gave the head of the electrical grid a seal to put in the sentry station so that a big invisible dome could cover the whole place if the hygrometers ever showed that the humidity was going up. The seals were there to keep the electrical gear inside safe. The leader of the Wave sighed as he read a report from Haku's border patrol. The older teen had written that a lot of Kumo ninja were coming to Wave's borders to check them out. Since his position was known to everyone, this was to be expected. He just hoped that Kumo wouldn't do something they'd regret, which he took to mean attack Wave. His country was friends with 3 big hidden villages and 5 small ones. If Hidden Lightning decided to attack, they would be crushed, even if they were friends with Hidden Rock. Naruto didn't like violence if he could avoid it, so he wrote a letter to the Raikage, A. He told him nicely that if he was interested in his village, all he had to do was send a delegation to check it out. If an alliance came after that, because Kumo textiles were valuable, he would gladly sign. He put the letter aside so that Daku could give it to the cage in person. Naruto worked late into the night until he decided he needed a break and went to a mall ramen stand at midnight. Still being surrounded by people who worked at night didn't help. He knew that after all he had done, he was a sort of celebrity, but he was used to staying out of the spotlight. Even though he liked the company. Naruto smiled at the woman who served him a bowl of ramen. He hadn't been to her restaurant for the first time, but he always brought a lot of customers with him, so she had to work quickly. He quickly told himself that the next time he would have to use a henge to get back. The short break he gave himself gave him a lot of time to think. He was almost at level 10 in Fuinjutsu, he had learned more ninjutsu, and he was now a high Junin in taijutsu, though he knew that with his seals and ninjutsu, hand-to-hand combat would be a last resort. He was only a low-level chunin with a sword, but that didn't bother him. With the swords he used, he didn't need too much experience. After fighting Mole, he was sure he could beat a mid-S rank ninja, even if he couldn't seal them. He stirred his chopsticks around in the broth and thought. No new buildings were being built that he should know about, but he still felt like there was one very important building he needed to order. It hit him as he was jumping from roof to get back to the leader's tower. He stopped on the hospital roof and used its high position to look over the walls that separated Outer Wave from Wave Central to see the Hoshi clan members being trained by Mole before they could join Dark. He had a good idea that they were in Training Ground 37, where Mole was yelling at them to do exercises that were hard on their bodies. They had been tested for 2 months, and Mole said that if everything went well, they would be ready in another month. So far, only 5 people have died during training. The doctor said that they had torn muscles and were out of chakra, but that they would be fine in a week. If the 5 injured ninja ever wanted to go back to training, they would have to do more intense training to catch up. The ninja said they preferred being regular Junin and turned down the offer. He shook his head and went back to his first thought, which was about the last major building to be built. Soon, his village would become more well-known around the world, and the students would have to move up to Chunin. He turned around and swished his leader's robes as he hopped from roof to get to his office. His mind was buzzing with ideas for new buildings. He had no problem sending qualified genin to other villages for the Chunin exams, but he would rather host one himself. He jumped through the window and set up a meeting with architects, stonemasons, and carpenters right away to start planning Wave's own Chunin exam arena. The blonde boy, who was now 13 years old, was too excited to sleep. Finally, Team 17, Akihiko Taru, Jiro Kaori, and Kenji Kaori. Your sensei will be Chico Billy. You should all wait here until your sensei comes to get you. If you didn't hear your name, wait behind, the class sensei for the graduating class said. The class broke into low murmuring, and the students moved to their teams. Some squealed with joy when they found out they were on the same team, while others gave each other the evil eye. As each sensei came in to get their genin, the class slowly started to empty out until only 3 genin were left. As they left the room, some genin who saw them gave them sympathetic looks. Weirdly, there was no Team 3. Inari turned his mouth to the side as he thought about why he and the other 2 were being singled out. He was pretty sure that he could still be a ninja even though he had just barely passed the academy. The boy with brown hair was sitting in the front row on the right side. He was wearing a forehead protector with pride, a plain dark blue shirt and black shorts. He also had the standard kunai and shuriken in his thighs. The boy tapped his fingers on his desk and stared at his teacher, who was too calm. The man gave him a wink and kept reading whatever he had on his desk. Another genin who had been singled out frowned as she thought about everything she had done and wondered if there was something wrong with her score. Since she had started at the academy 6 months ago, she had gotten top marks on every test she had taken. The silver-haired girl, who was 12, had a crease on her forehead. She was wearing a tight shirt in a deep red color and tight pants that stopped at the middle of her calf. Her shoulder-length silver hair was pulled back into a short ponytail. She sat all the way in the back of the room. The last left-out genin was a nervous boy with smooth black hair. Sweat ran down his face as he, too, wondered why he was left out. He had also never failed a test, even one he took a year and a half before. He was just a mark for the girl behind him, so why wasn't he put on a team? He played around with his side bag, which was sitting on his lap. The class sensei, a chubby smoke ninja, stood up and read from a clipboard, Inari Kaiza. The boy perked up at his name, Manzo Nariko. The sweating black-haired boy jumped a bit when he heard his name, Hoshi Reizo Kamlin. The silver-haired Hoshi genin nodded. The door opened and in walked a tall man with a chubby face but a very slimly built body. His right eye and the top corner of the right side of his lips were covered by a green spotty birthmark. He was wearing the usual clothes for a chunin. The man stood still and looked at the 3 genin while rubbing his nose. "These are them?" he asked the teacher. "Hi, Keiru-sama, frog. Follow me," he told the waiting genin in a short sentence. Inari was to jump over his desk and follow the village leader's personal assistant. Nariko went after taking a few deep breaths to calm herself down, and Kamlin followed last. They walked from Wave Central's gates all the way to Training Ground 19. Most of the training ground was made up of trees, and a slow-moving river ran through it. Nariko was shocked when he saw someone sitting on a stump in the middle of the training ground and drawing a bird's nest on a tree far away. He and Inari both yelled, "Leader-sama." Naruto just told them to be quiet and sit down on the ground. "Thank you, frog. You can go now," he said, and the Black Ops member nodded and disappeared while looking at the 3 genin. Inari laughed and said, "Frog? What kind of name is that?" Kamlin hit him on the head and said, "Hey. Thank you, Reizo. Please call me Kamlin, Leader-sama, or Cam for short," she said. The wave leader hadn't even looked up from his work, which made her wonder how he knew she had hit Inari. Kamlin. Inari rubbed his sore head and glared at the Hoshi genin as he waited for the village leader to finish what he was doing. Naruto began speaking. "If you ever sit down and look around, really look around, you would notice that there are little pockets of peace, even in a war-torn place. Of all the places I could have gone to live in, I chose Wave. Do you want to know why?" The 3 genin nodded. "Because I saw raw potential in the very earth, I saw potential in the air, I saw potential in the people here. I saw peace in conflict even when Gado controlled here, and I chose this place to reside in because I could do something to expand that peace to cover the country and everything we touch. The village I lived in before were not too welcoming about my status as Jinchuriki. The information had been made known to the people, and they strived to take away what peace I had. Wave was a sinking nation when I came, but I restored it, not fully, but I did my best, because all I ever wanted was a place I could find peace and actually strive to protect. Wave became my family and I would readily protect here with my life." The students were enthralled, even though Naruto wasn't looking at them as he said it. "Don't get me wrong, I have friends and acquaintances in my old village, but what I really want is for this place to do well," he said, slipping his sketchbook and pencil into his right sleeve and making them vanish right in front of their eyes. Naruto smiled his signature light smile at the genin as he looked down at them with his sky-blue eyes. He looked into each person's eyes and immediately felt very old. He was only 2 years older than the boy and girl sitting in front of him, and he already had 3 students, not counting the genin sitting in front of him. He wore nothing but his army uniform. "Introduce yourself," he said while pointing at Inari. "Uma. Naruto laughed and rolled his eyes. "Fine, I'll go first. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm the leader of Wave Country. I like studying fuinjutsu, training, sketching nature, eating ramen, and some other things that will bore you. I dislike chaos and loud noises. My hobbies are getting better at seal work and eating ramen. My goals are to be the best seal master in history and to help Wave move forward. Now you. My name is Inari Kaiza, genin of Wave Country. I like fish, training and my grandpa, Tazuna. I hate spoiled sports, bullies and goats." Here he shivered from a memory and continued. "My hobbies are fishing with my grandpa, cooking and practicing my shuri kenjutsu. My goal is become a junin." He pumped his fist in the air proudly. Naruto gave the next person permission to talk. "My name is Reza Kamlin, and I'm a genin from Wave Country. I'm from the Hoshi clan, and I like my family, my clan, and Wave. I don't like loud noises and turnips, and I like sparring with my cousin and learning new things. My goal is to take over my clan as clan head," she said with a proud look at Naruto. Naruto pointed to the last boy, who took a big breath. "My." He cleared his throat. "My name is Manzo Nariko. I'm a genin from Wave Country. I love learning, silence, and seals. I don't like noise. My hobbies are studying seals, learning about new seals, training, and cooking. My goal is to become the leader of Wave Country." Naruto already knew everything about this team, from what colors they liked to what size shoes they wore, but this was just a formality. He crossed his arms and pursed his lips. The team was made up of the worst student and two of the smartest students Wave had ever had, but that didn't mean they would work well together. They leaned in to hear what their blonde sensei had to say. "I want to tell you something," she said. "You aren't yet genin." "What?" "But we took the exams and passed." "How aren't we genin?" Inari yelled in anger, but Naruto's blank look made him stop. He shuffled back into himself when he remembered that the person in front of him had the right to take his headband and stop him from becoming a shinobi. "Good. I know you all passed the exams, but that only makes you ninjas, not team members, and not even close to what a genin should be." The clan heiress asked, "What do we have to do to become genin, Naruto-sama?" "The test I want to give you is very simple," he said as he stood up and looked menacingly over his students. He reached into his left sleeve and slowly pulled something out. "A discount. I want you all to bring my order of ramen from Blue Noodles Emporium to my office. You all know my office, right?" They nodded. "Good. You have 4 hours. Don't mess this up." He gave the coupon to Inari and took a step forward, disappearing in a seal-less shunshin, which made the genin look at the display with wide eyes. The first person to break the silence was Inari. "Easy. We'll get his order in 20 minutes or less," he said, holding up the coupon. "What are you two waiting for?" "We're wasting daylight." Cam asked with a delicately raised silver eyebrow, "Do you even know where the Blue Noodle Emporium is?" "Well, no, but we can ask around," said the boy with brown hair. "That will burn daylight, you idiot. Why do you think he gave us 4 hours to get an order to his office?" "Something's up." Nariko, the boy with the black hair, said, "Leader Sama said this was a test. This must mean something. One thing at a time. First, where is this Blue Noodle place?" Said Cam. "I know where it is. I work there part-time," said the boy with black hair. "Why didn't you say something before?" Grumbled Inari. "Leader Sama gave us 4 hours to get ramen to his office. I did the maths, and it shouldn't take us more than 30 minutes, Nariko said right away. He looked around the empty training ground and shivered, something's not right. "Lead the way, and we can deal with the problem when it comes," Inari insisted. The young seal master with black hair nodded and motioned for the other two to follow him. First, Inari put the coupon in the pouch on his kunai and ran after his teammates. They were able to get through the invisible bubble at the central gate of the wave because they had seal tattoos. They kept running at a steady pace to the mall. Cam kept a close eye on the wave people as they went about their daily lives. She still didn't understand why the wave leader had given them 4 hours. Not until they were halfway to the mall did something happen. She pushed Nariko out of the way of a loose melon cart, saving him from being crushed. The boy with black hair looked at how close he had come to dying with wide eyes, but Inari kept running. As soon as the melon cart came out, it went away. Inari, wait. But it was too late. A big balloon that had been thrown out of nowhere exploded on his back and threw him face first to the ground. He scrambled to his feet and looked around quickly, furious. Who did that? The people asked, but they just laughed at him. Nariko ran up to him and told him to keep walking, making sure he didn't touch the boy covered in paint. This is why he gave us 4 hours, he set traps. Inari shoved him to the side quickly to avoid another melon cart that was running amok. This time, the owner of the cart ran after it. We need to hurry then, he said with a serious face for the first time in a long time. Hi, they both said, and kept going as fast as they could down the street towards the mall. Bowling balls rattled behind them as they ran through the mall's revolving doors. Because they didn't see the traps in time, they were covered in mud, soot, dirt, and paint. Cam looked even worse. She had been doused with honey, and she didn't know how or why, but feathers had landed all over her. As she pushed both boys away from a goat that had fallen from the ceiling and landed on her, it looked like the twitch in her left eye would never go away. If looks were all it took to kill, the poor thing frog dropped from the ceiling would have died twice. Haku laughed into his hand and stopped to watch Nariko's next step. The boy slipped and fell into a lingerie store, and his screams were melodic. With his eyes tightly shut, Inari ran in and pulled the boy out. Cam yelled, "I hate this," and kicked away another goat that had been thrown at her from who knows where. The goat didn't move, but Cam's foot hurt. Arg! She yelled, and now it was Inari who was the calm one. This has been going on for 2 hours. Her hands were shaking with anger, and she kicked the fat goat again, but it didn't move. Instead, it just looked at her with dull eyes. Nariko said, "You need to calm down, Kamlin-san," but the girl turned to him with flames in her eyes. Inari stepped in before the feathery girl could beat up the other boy. "He's trying to mess with us, don't let him get to you," he said, shaking the girl's shoulders so she would look at him. "Why would he do this?" She tore up. "It'll take days to get this out of my hair." Inari would have laughed if he wasn't almost in a worse situation. He was pretty sure his mother would burn his clothes because they were covered in paint and horse poop. When she was about to cry, he nodded and shook her again. I know, but we have to pass this test to become ninja. You want that, don't you?" She sniffed and nodded. "Then pull yourself together and let's keep going," he said, knowing that if his mother heard him, she would wash his mouth out with soap. The girl gently pushed him away and gave him a firm nod. They ran as fast as they could through the busy mall, where their bad smell made a path for them. When some horse poop fell from the ceiling, Cam grabbed Inari's hand and pulled him to her. When they turned around, the poop had already been cleaned up as if it had never been there. Nariko made a few hand seals and said, "Clone technique." 4 clones that looked exactly like him but were just illusions exploded in front of him and ran in different directions. Even though the plan was good, it couldn't fool ninjas who had been around for a while. Cam pulled a 2-foot-long metal rod out of her shuriken pouch. She spun it in her hands, and it shot out 7 feet. She moved out of the way of a few bowling balls, and Nariko quickly took a scroll out of his side pack and threw it open, hoping that what he was about to do would work. As he jumped ahead of his teammates, the simple seal for storage flashed all the way across the big scroll, and the remaining bowling balls were immediately sealed inside when they hit it. Yes. He rolled up the scroll and waved it over his head to celebrate. Cam gave him a quick thumbs up before she had to jump out of the way of another fat goat. "Damn goats," Inari muttered, and she nodded to show that she agreed. They ran into the blue noodle, grabbed the ramen order, and ran up to the roof. They all breathed in the fresh air and started jumping from roof to get to the leader's tower. They heard a loud bleat from behind them, and when they turned around, they were horrified to see another fat goat hurtling towards them. Scatter. The boy threw the ramen order, which was in a leather bag, to Cam. When she slipped on some ice, she threw it to Nariko, and the boy threw a blunt kunai at her while he caught the noodles in his right hand. The girl caught the kunai. He gave the order to Inari and climbed up the building. The 3 dirty people pushed their way through the door and into Naruto's office. The blonde leader, who was bored and reading a book, looked up at them and laughed. "With 5 minutes to spare, I'm impressed," she said. Inari walked slowly to the desk and put the order down. Your order." "Leader-sama," he said, feeling like he wanted to collapse. Naruto poked the bag with a pen and said, "It smells like shit." Cam's left eye twitched violently, and she wanted to yell, "Well, what did you expect?" For the first time in his life, the blonde seal master put down his bowl of ramen, put his elbows on the desk, and held his head up. "Before I pass you, I have a simple question to ask. What did this test teach you? You're a jackass?" Surprisingly, Nariko said this. Mole laughed under her breath from where she was hiding. Naruto heard this, but he didn't care. "Yes? That we need to pay more attention to where we are?" Cam asked. "A lesson, but not the right answer." "That we need to think with our heads before we move in," said Inari. "Not what I'm looking for, but still right." When they didn't know what he meant, he gave them a hint. "Imagine you all took this test alone." Their eyes got big as they remembered all the times they pushed themselves away from danger or even put themselves in the way of danger so it wouldn't hurt their teammates. Naruto smiled brightly when they seemed to get what he was trying to say. A team is only as strong as its members. This isn't just about a person's skills or strength, but also their heart and will. You all did your best in this test, and I couldn't be happier to tell you that you all passed. Team 3. The genin stood up as soon as the blonde teen got out of his chair. Orochimaru swirled the contents of a file in his right hand as he looked into it intently. He hummed and wrote something down on a notepad with his left hand. He gently put the file in a rack with 5 other similar files of different colors. The snake Sanin rubbed his hands and could hardly hold back his excitement as he looked through a microscope at the DNA multiplying on a glass film. The man turned around and looked at the dead shinobi on the operating table. It was a nameless Konoha ninja he had kidnapped after the invasion. All of the experiments he had done on the man had killed him, but he had been successful on one count. "I have a Uchiha." His evil laughs could be heard in his lab and throughout his building. After a month. "Pain, you need to calm down," Toby said, which was a bit of a surprise. Nagato was so angry and upset that he was yelling. The crippled man even stood up enough to glare bloody murder at the person speaking. After her old friend punched her in the gut, Conan was shaking in the far corner of the room. "Give me one good reason, Madara Uchiha, why I shouldn't kill you right now," Pain sneered. His purple, rippled eyes were crazy wide with anger, and it would only take one wrong word to send him over the edge into frothing madness. Obito could already see one of Nagato's path containers, probably his favorite Asura path, slowly creak open. He didn't want to be turned into a bloody paste at the side of the room, so he moved his hands to tell Pain to slow down. "You need to save up all your strength. We can't have you wasting it all when you should be saving it for more important things." He didn't want to kill Pain yet, even though he could just dodge a powerful attack with a well-placed Kamui. Pain snarled and spat, "You're right." He closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead to calm down. "That kid and his country get on my nerves more and more every day." He had just heard that Sasori and Deidara had been badly hurt by a group of Konoha and Wave shinobi from the Star Clan and Daku, who were angry about Gaara being taken away. The plan was to keep the Cage calm enough for them to take the one tail out of its seal and put it back in the ghetto statue. Even though they had found the hideout and were in the process of getting rid of Shukaku, the entrance to the cave was destroyed by a blow from Daku and Sakura working together. Sasori and Deidara barely got away on one of Deidara's clay dragons, and since no shinobi could fly, they focused on getting the weak one-tails holder back to his village. When the Akatsuki leader heard about the villages and countries Wave was working with, he finally understood why it was so hard for Hidan and Kakuzu to get into Waterfall. Even if the henge didn't affect Waterfall, anyone who went through the water without the seal tattoo would have their chakras sucked out of them and used to strengthen an all-element trap. This would alert every shinobi in Waterfall and every authorized visitor from Smoke, Chill, Fang, Marsh, Kiri, Suna, Konoha, and Wave that someone was trying to get into the village. Even the zombie brothers were doomed to die. Kakuzu found this out the hard way when he sent 2 shadow clones to test the defense, and the light spray from the first henge neutralizing waterfall hit the clones at the exact moment the trap was set. The clones' chakra was taken away, and the earth held them down. When they managed to get out, they were sprayed with fire. They were able to avoid that, but they couldn't get around the lightning field that blocked their exit and kept them in a cage. The worst part was that the defense had been tightened after that try, if that was even possible. Except for Kiri, Suna, and Konoha, this was the same for every other village Wave was friends with. When Zetsu told him that a small group of ninja had gone to see Wave a week before, it made him worry that Kumo might join forces with Wave. The delegation didn't have any notable ninjas, but after visiting the country, they didn't even have a bad opinion of it. Pain muttered, I can't take this child's disrespect any longer, as Conan shakily came back to him, as loyal as ever. Tell all of our members that we're going to invade Wave in a week. They should be ready. To be honest, every member of the Akatsuki had met someone from Wave or one of the other allied villages in some way. How are Sasori and Daidara doing? Conan asked. The woman with purple hair said, Daidara is back to full strength, but it will take Sasori a while, maybe a few days, to restock his puppet army. That's plenty of time. We catch the Kyuubi Jinchuriki first, but we don't take his beast until the end, because I want him to suffer. Nagato's red hair hung over his eyes in a scary way, and Toby nodded. The Sharingan user left the room in his fool disguise to go tell the other Akatsuki members. Nagato, are you going to help with the attack? If everything goes wrong, which I don't think it will, I'll go after him myself. I hope you'll stick with me, Conan said with a firm nod. Good. Inari pulled a shuriken out of his bag and threw it forward. The spinning star flew through the air and hit the right shoulder of a target dummy. When he heard Cam laughing at his attempt, his shoulders sagged with disappointment. He saw Cam's own target and lowered his head when he saw her single shuriken in the middle of that person's forehead. Even though his mood was getting worse, she stood her ground. His mood got even worse when Nariko threw his own shuriken and it cut the target in the neck. Naruto looked at the last two and gave them a thumbs up, but when he saw Inari's, he raised his eyebrows. The blonde was testing how fast they could pull out a shuriken and throw it accurately to see how fast they could react. He thought that Nariko and Camlin had died, but he didn't think that Inari had. He walked up to the sad boy and put his hand on his shoulder. Inari briefly looked up to see who it was, but then he looked back down, expecting to be told off. Naruto smiled and said, Did you know I'm average at throwing weapons, too? It was a little lie, but it was close enough to the truth. His students looked at him with wide, surprised eyes. Yes, I didn't know how to throw one properly or at the right speed. You know what I did? They shook their heads. I found ways to improvise. Nariko asked, How, sensei? Naruto threw his arm at Inari's targets, and 5 paper shuriken flew out of his sleeve. He twitched his fingers slightly, and the paper shuriken changed their paths from a close circle to a sort of star formation. His paper shuriken pierced the head, neck, heart, and arms near the armpit, where the main artery is. He moved his fingers again, and the paper weapons came out, flew to him, and went back into his sleeve. Sensei is so cool, Nariko whispered, and Cam nodded unconsciously in agreement. I use extra thin ninja wire that is only held together by chakra that I bring from smoke. The boy who liked fish said, But those are so expensive, I can't buy them. Naruto laughed and said, I had to start small, you know, with standard issue ninja wire until I saved up enough to get the smoke wire. He pulled out 3 kunai and easily threw them at Nariko's targets, which were the farthest away from him. He twitched his fingers again, and the kunai went from going to the stomach to the head, cutting deep. He moved his throwing hand quickly, and the kunai fell out of his hand and back into it. They saw the ninja wire this time. The leader of the wave stood back and looked at them all. It all comes down to commitment and timing, he said. Camlin and Nariko watched as Inari searched through his shuriken pouch for a single throwing star and a spool of thin iron wire. He put the wire through the hole in the spinning star and then threw the weapon. As it flew through the air, he did what he had seen Naruto do, making a quick, twitching movement with his hand so the star changed direction from the left leg and cut into the crotch. Cam tried not to laugh, and Naruto laughed at how red-faced Inari looked. It's a start, he said. Team 3 was a kind of all-purpose team that was mostly good at capturing and questioning people, as well as infiltration and spying. Naruto had been giving them drills for a month, putting them through the easiest situations he could think of and teaching them how to keep going. The lesson for the day was to see if they could draw their standard weapons quickly. So far, only Inari has had trouble. Next, he told Cam and Nariko to keep practicing. He left clones to watch over them while he moved Inari away from them just a little bit. He spent the whole day showing him how to quickly thread wire through a shuriken and hide it in his pouch. The boy was happy to take it all, as well as the extra advice on how to change the direction of his weapons with just a little push or pull back. After 2 days of this kind of practice, they finally fought each other. The first match was between Camlin and Nariko. Naruto had looked at the fighting style of Konoha's academy and liked how it was a mix of all the other fighting styles Konoha knew, but in a much smaller way. He didn't want the academy students to be like the people in his old village, so he took his time to think about the stance and let Deku try it out. Nariko was born on Wave. Gato left him alone, so he had to learn how to take care of himself. The boy with black hair had a lot of problems with self-confidence, but every lesson brought out little bits of fire in him. He was one of the children Naruto put in his Orphan Academy Students Fund. Each month, he worked with other villages to give orphans who were still in school but not yet adults a certain amount of money until they graduated. It was up to the students how they spent the money. Nariko spent most of his time on the streets, so even though he learned the new Wave Academy style of taijutsu, he couldn't get rid of the fact that he had learned to fight first. Nariko took a loose boxing stance and bounced on the balls of his feet. This was an odd way to fight for a seal master, so Naruto made a note to change it. Cam had been to the academy before, when he was still in Hoshigakure, so she already knew how to fight. Naruto looked between them silently and cut his hand off sharply. Cam shot at the boy and punched him in the head. Nariko blocked the punch to his head with her forearm and gave a strong uppercut to her stomach. She used the momentum of the blow to spin around and hit him on the head. The less experienced genin shook his head to get rid of the dust. He rolled away from her punch to the head and flipped backwards to avoid another punch. Nariko came at her with his right fist leading the way. He acted like he was going to hit her in the neck, but instead he turned around and hit the side of her head with his elbow. She grunted after the blow and pushed him off his feet. He fell hard, but rolled backwards as she stomped on the ground, just missing his chest. He stumbled away from her and used his bare forearms to block a barrage of punches. When his arms couldn't take another blow, he ducked down and kicked the back of her head with a spinning kick. When the blow hit, she fell forward and stopped moving. He moved slowly up to her and poked her arm with his toe. When she didn't move, he turned to his sensei. Then she got back up and tackled him to the ground, holding his head in place with her hands on his neck. "Winner, Camlin," he said, grabbing the girl by her collar and pulling her away from the boy. "Nariko, you let your guard down." But she wasn't moving. The boy with black hair coughed into his hands. "Then hold her down with your weapon. This is a hand-to-hand fight, not pure taijutsu." Nariko nodded, and Naruto patted his shoulder. "You did fine, but your brawling style doesn't have a good offense. Try combining the strikes from the academy style with it. It would be a great combination, and I trust you to master it well." "Hi sensei," the boy saluted and sat down under a tree on their official team training ground 13. The blonde sensei looked at the girl and saw that she was looking up at him with wide, expectant eyes. "You were using Hoshi Clan Kata, right?" he asked. "Hi, Naruto-sensei. It's a versatile style, but I think it's too rigid and can only be used for certain attacks." "I don't understand, sensei," she cocked her head to the side. Her clan's taijutsu had been studied and tested by generations of Hoshi ninja. "The last kick Nariko gave you hurt more than you think," he said. He was right. The kick had knocked her out for a few seconds, but the toe nudge woke her up. "Your sides are open, but your clan makes up for it by using their bow staff," he said. She nodded. "Keep practicing, but learn to move more smoothly," he said. It was like training Hinata all over again. The leader of the wave put his hands behind his back and looked at the last member who hadn't fought yet. He turned to Cam but didn't go through with it. He had already said out loud what her biggest weakness was, so Inari and Nariko could take advantage of this. He sighed and closed his eyes, then signaled for the boy with brown hair to come to him. "I haven't sparred, sensei," Inari said with a sly grin on his face. "I know. You're going up against me." He stopped grinning right away and opened his eyes wide. "Well, what about the others? They can still fight," he said. Naruto took a few steps back and signaled for Inari to come at him. "Maybe another time," he said. "Give me everything you've got." After hesitating for a few seconds, Inari charged at Naruto. He clenched his teeth and threw his fist forward. Naruto leaned to the side and used his right hand to grab the limb, turning Inari around and pushing him back. From this, the boy's face fell to the ground. The fish lover growled at how quickly he was taken out and rolled forward to his feet. He then ran at Naruto with his fist raised. Naruto saw what happened and dodged the blow. He then punched Inari in the gut, and as the boy flew back, he pulled him back and knocked him off his feet, putting him back on his face. Naruto dodged a kunai slash and blocked another slash with his shin guards. He then used the same raised leg to push the boy's face away. Inari just charged in again and went for a flying kick. The blonde sensei easily blocked the attack and enjoyed the wide-eyed look his student gave him before he twisted his wrist and spun the boy in the air. He stepped back as the brown-haired boy fell to the ground with a small thud. Naruto crept forward and kicked the kunai away, pointing his fist straight at Inari's face and saying, "That's enough." The rest of the day, they ran through muscle-building exercises and fought Naruto as a group so they could get a feel for their skills and learn how to work best together without thinking about it. He knew they were on the right track when Cam pretended to hit him in the head with her staff, but instead kneeled in front of him so Noriko could use her back as a springboard to punch him. Their team meetings always started at 5 a.m. with a sprint around Outer Wave, followed by a team spar and chakra control exercises. He would give them a break at noon when he had to go back to the office, but he would leave them with some tips and advice until he came back at 6 p.m. for a team dinner, which helped them get to know each other better. Even though they could only get together 5 days a week, the other 2 days were for their own lives. During the 5 days they met, they got together at night, 2 hours before midnight, in his office to keep training, but it was more mental than physical. For example, they did chakra exercises that didn't involve walking on the surface or balancing senbons. This chakra control exercise had them move drops of water from one side of a closed cylinder to the other without shaking the cylinder. The exercise was different for each affinity, but since everyone on his team had a water affinity and Cam had a wind affinity, it was fine. On the 4th day of the week, when they started fighting more as a team by using each other as distractions, he chose for the team dinners to be at his home, the leader's tower. He chose one of the smaller, cozier rooms with a table in the middle and 4 chairs around it. Naruto sat down at the head of the table and told his 3 students to do the same. Then, servants flew into the room and started bringing food, most of which was way out of the students' price range. Inari and Noriko took advantage of Naruto's kindness by shoveling as much food down their throats as they could. Cam, on the other hand, stuffed her mouth with a little more style. The blonde leader took some time to think about how his shinobi system was growing. 14 of the 17 genin teams had passed, and the other 12 were on a reserve list until the next graduation. Until then, they would have to take refresher courses. He hid Black Ops or Dark Shinobi around Wave to protect her from the shadows while the police did the same thing in the open. The Dark sometimes took on important missions, and the group was still growing. The Star didn't like being told what to do, but they still saw Daku as the undisputed leader of the Dark and Mole as his right-hand man. Just last week, Tamari told him through her summons that Gaara had been taken by people he didn't know. He had sent Daku and some Hoshi Junin to help. On their way to Suna, they ran into some Konoha ninja and hurt Deidara the Mad Bomber and Sasori of the Red Sands very badly. When they came back, he heard that they were wearing red clouds on a black cloak, which was the same cloak that Kisame and Itachi wore when they tried to kidnap him. Then, he got a message from Waterfall through his communication seal that 2 people dressed the same way, who were clones of Kakuzu, had been seen and were thrown away by his seal defense. Naruto put 2 and 2 together and figured out that these people in cloaks were after Jinchuriki, but he didn't know why. He wrote a letter to the new Mizukage to tell her what he had found because he didn't want to be in the same room with her. She told him that their Jinchuriki were well protected. He had tried to warn Iwa, but the village took his message as an insult and said he had threatened to take their Jinchuriki. Naruto was sure that Iwagakure would attack soon, probably with this cloak-wearing group, since he was the reason they hadn't captured a ninja yet, both directly and indirectly. He told the Kumo group that had come to visit a while ago what he was thinking, and he knew that they would take the news back to their village. The genin teams had already started doing E&D rank missions to fill up their mission quotas, but his team hadn't started yet because he wanted to teach them how to work as a team. Maybe in a week, they would be ready. He had time to take on a team because Daku, who was always active, helped him with some of his work while Frog read through the less important ones. He didn't need as many shadow clones to stay in his seat while he watched his team train because his dark shadow was with him most of the time. He wouldn't be there for lower-level missions. Instead, he would send Frog in his place. However, he would be there for most missions outside the village until they became Chunin, which was when he thought they would be able to take care of themselves. As far as he knew, Cam was more experienced than the 2 10-year-old boys because she had already been in the Hoshigakure Academy for 3 years. The team's sensei made the most of this by making Cam a sort of leader in his place, while Noriko was the trapping expert because he was learning seals and Inari was the muscle with his suicidal fighting techniques. He smiled at Noriko. He had been helping the boy build a foundation for his own seal work. The boy was still at level 1, but he was making steady progress for someone who had only learned the art a few months before. He would call the boy to his office late at night, with his other team members there, and teach the boy how to quickly draw seals and why some basic strokes went with others. This would help him in the long run because it made Nariko realize how much more there was to learn about Fuinjutsu. The blonde seal master slowed him down by telling him that even though seals were more than they seemed, they were still a subtle but very dangerous art, more so than taijutsu and ninjutsu, and that he would have been even more disabled if he hadn't been in Uzumaki Jinchuriki. Next, he smiled at Kamlin. The heiress of the Hoshi clan had been learning at night in his office with the rest of her team how to use her wind chakra in a fight instead of just blowing around uncontrollable gusts of wind. He wouldn't teach any of them ninjutsu unless they asked, and they knew that, so Cam asked him to teach her wind release, wind vacuum, and a rank wind technique he had learned from the Shimura clan library en route, which is now in the library's academy section. She was more willing to work with Waveborn than her clan, and she learned with her Waveborn teammates like a fish to water. Naruto and her father, the head of the Hoshi clan, helped her learn how to control her wind chakra. Usually, all the girl needed was a little push in the right direction. Last, he smiled at Inari. The fish-loving boy hadn't changed much since he was the last one to leave the academy. He wanted the boy to become a master spy and infiltrator because he was always the last one caught in tracking drills and had the best henge of anyone on his team. By reading the file with general information about a person, the boy was able to get a good idea of who that person was and how he thought that person sounded. Inari had the least amount of chakra, which was a shame, but this turned out to be a huge blessing. It gave him low-level Junin control and allowed him to super suppress his chakra without using one of Naruto's seals. Before giving him a jutsu, Naruto made him do drills to improve his strength and control. Inari had to do hard exercises in a separate room during their night lessons in his office so he wouldn't stink up the office. This was to raise his chakra levels. In general, they were making good progress. Inari and Nariko didn't mind having a Hoshi member, even if she was an heiress. At first, they were unsure, but after a month and a week of being a team, their doubts were gone. Cam was also worried about having team members who weren't as good as her, but Naruto had shown her that this wasn't always a bad thing. Each member had their own strengths that were amplified when they fought together, like when Nariko used Cam as a willing springboard to try to land a punch. He didn't succeed, but it was a good try. He also taught them how to do first aid without using medical chakra. For Inari, he told him that he could learn medical ninjutsu. He told the boy that he didn't have to be a medic ninja to learn the art, but it would make him the team's medic. After dinner, he sent them home to take a break. He told them to come back at 10 at night, accompanied by Dark Ninja. After giving everyone their jobs, he knelt down and got to work as wave leader, since he had sent Frog home early for a week's break and Daku was taking care of things that the Dark Commander needed help with. Naruto looked over some papers while hunched over. When he saw that there was nothing to worry about, he started writing down something he had been thinking about for a long time. He had planned to make Wave Leader a clan title for the Uzumaki, especially for Seal Masters at level 9 and above. This was if he wanted to start a family someday, but he was still too young to think about that. This was done so that after he saw that there was a Kazekage clan and how well it ran things, he could see the good in it. Since the Uzumaki were the most closely related to Naruto, the first leader, they had to be loyal to Wave, just like the Jinchuriki in every other village. If Nariko really wanted to be the leader of the Wave, he would have to show Naruto how good he is at Fuinjutsu, Ninjutsu, and Taijutsu before he could be called an honorable Uzumaki. Since honorary Uzumaki titles can be given to good people, his clan wouldn't be better than anyone else. This was just to narrow down where to look for a leader. Naruto had read about every important Uzumaki in history, from the first Azukage to Kushina. All of them, including himself, were dedicated to their work, whether it was Taijutsu, Kenjutsu, or Fuinjutsu. This was shown by the fact that every important Uzumaki had made at least one new jutsu. Naruto looked up when he heard the door open and sighed lightly when he saw it was Tamari. The Kazekage's daughter had been in his country since he left Konoha, visiting sand on missions with wave ninjas. The girl was very sure about something that he still didn't understand. The blonde Kanochi walked in and gave Naruto a small wave. He nodded back, and she looked at his very focused students. The last time she saw Inari, he was in another room doing pull-ups while doing the wave chakra control exercise that was tied horizontally to his legs and back. It was a hard task, but he didn't seem to mind it much. The battle fan user walked up to him slowly and smiled. He smiled back a little. "I brought you something to eat," she said, pulling a small scroll from behind her and opening it to reveal some ramen. I made it myself, she said with a proud smile. He looked at the noodles and swallowed nervously when he saw the color. It wasn't supposed to be violet, and it shouldn't have smelled like burning tires. Why? Thank you, Tamari, he said through a thick layer of saliva. Tamari shifted nervously on her heels and said, well, what are you waiting for? Dig in. When his students heard her exclaim, they looked over and watched as he slowly swished his chopsticks in the broth. Ramen shouldn't bubble like that, so he said, Kurama, you better heal me. Kyuubi put a mental hand on Naruto's shoulder to reassure him and winced when the boy put some noodles in his mouth. I'll try my best, Kit, I'll try my best, he said. After this, Naruto's eyes started to water, and he let out a small, quiet sob. He tried to hide it and kept swallowing until he cut the noodles. Naruto sneezed and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. This is great, he said in a shaky voice. His stomach was rumbling in protest, but he stopped it with a firm pat. You're not lying, are you? She asked him when his students started giggling into their hands. Naruto thought about what he was going to say before he said it. You just need a little more practice, he said. His stomach gurgled in anger, and he patted it again. He could see her happiness draining away, and she quickly turned away so he wouldn't see her shaky frown. Oh, she said. Say something, Kit. Kyuubi could see that a crying girl was going to be a problem, and he knew that neither he nor his holder could deal with crying girls. Kushina and Yakumo were proof of this. He whimpered when he thought about how Kushina had forced her way into his mindscape just to punch him. I'm sure Nariko can show you a few things, won't you, Nariko? Naruto glared at him, and the boy with black hair nodded quickly. See? He can even be your taste test, won't you, Nariko? The boy with black hair gulped from Naruto's glare, but he still nodded shakily. In fact, all three of them can taste test for you, he glared at all three of them. You don't have to do that, Naruto-sama, she said quietly. No, it's not a problem at all, he said as he stood up to ruffle her hair and ran to the door to throw up the bad ramen he had just eaten. She said, okay, and then she ran out of the office not long after. How are you feeling, Kimimaro-kun? Orochimaru asked as he listened to the bone release user's heartbeat with a stethoscope. I feel great, Orochimaru-sama. In the Snake Sanin's lab, the teen was sitting on a hospital-style bed. His shirt was off, so you could see the small holes in his collar and his pale, clear skin. On his right arm, there was a patch of skin that looked scary and was spreading, but it didn't reach his chest. The skin was a different kind of pale and flaky white. On his bicep, there were two red circles that kind of glowed. He moved his arm and smiled, thank you, Orochimaru-sama. The older man ignored it and gave the boy a file with a light brown liquid inside. The boy swallowed it without hesitation. There was no visible effect, but Kimimaro could feel his new arm getting stronger. It was a big deal for Orochimaru to cut off his arm, and it was an even bigger deal for him to be quick enough to put new skin on the arm as it grew. The Snake Sanin took the Hashirama DNA from Danzo and used hard experiments to make the cells multiply. He then combined the cells with the developing Uchiha cells from the dead ninja with the dormant Uchiha genes. The first cells mixed with the Uchiha cells but couldn't replicate the Sharingan in Kimimaro, but it did give the bone release user a regenerative ability that rivaled even his. Kimimaro only had limited control over trees with the Hashirama cells. He thought this was because the boy had been very sick before the cells were put in place, so the wood release cells were more concerned with keeping him alive than giving him the famous wood release. He was done with that. Orochimaru smiled big when he saw the boy try out his bone release by shooting strong bones out of his shoulders and ribs. Kimimaro was even stronger than before. Be careful. Naruto-kun. After 3 days. Country music. Naruto was relaxing in his living room, which was a large, open room in the leader's tower. But he could hear alarm bells going off in his head. It was the weekend, so he gave his students and himself a break from training. He also took a small break from the office, but he had to go back in an hour. Just that morning, he had met with the leader of the Hoshi clan without Cam in the room and told him how much his daughter's team had improved. The man was glad to hear that she wasn't making a fool of herself. Naruto didn't really care what the man thought. He was just there to tell him that his daughter was a great shinobi. Next, he met Inari's mother, Tsunami, and grandfather, Tizuna. He told both of them that their charge was growing up well. Since Nariko didn't have any parents or relatives, Naruto sat down with him for 10 minutes to help him improve his handwriting. He groaned and got out of his extra comfy armchair, which was right next to a window from which he could see Olive Wave. He had just sat down after giving Nariko some quick strokes, and now the alarm seals on his arm were going off. He rubbed his tired eyes and nodded offhand when a dark Hoshi ninja wearing a dog mask flashed up next to him. "Dog, where is the hole?" He stood up and stretched his whole body, concentrating on his dead leg as the male ninja watched. "The alarm seals have picked up an unknown flying object to the west, about 26 miles away. It's just outside the barrier range but inside the detection range," the ninja said while still on his knees. The level 9.5 seal master pursed his lips and pulled out a pair of clear, blue-rimmed glasses instead of the sunglasses he had been wearing when he broke into Root headquarters. He cleaned his glasses with the sleeve on his wrist and put them on. He walked over to the window and looked out while lightly rubbing the sides of his glasses. When they saw Naruto, the rectangular edges of the glasses lit up with a light blue light. They zoomed in on where the ninja had said there was a breach. He swore when he saw the Mad Bomber and the Desert Scorpion wearing red clouds on black cloaks. "Get every civilian and genin to the underground bunkers, no exceptions," he sprinted to the door, and the ninja quickly disappeared. Naruto tapped the side of his glasses, and Mole walked beside him with a slight bow. "We're about to be attacked," Naruto said. "Hi Naruto-sama, we've seen Hoshigaki Kisame, Uchiha Itachi, Kakuzu of Waterfall, Hidan of Hot Spring Village, and Rai of Kumo in the far west. I can only guess who they're going after." Mole nodded and said, "I want every ninja above genin who is available to get ready to defend the bunkers. Kisame can easily take down our defenses with Samahata, his sword." He helped a girl who had fallen down as she ran by. The symbol on her big shirt told him she was from the Hoshi clan. He waved, and a dark ninja jumped down and grabbed the scared girl, taking her with him to find her parents. People moved out of the way for their village leader and the deputy dark commander as they walked through. They bowed and moved quickly to where they were going to stay. He could feel Daku next to him before he could see him. "Uchiha Itachi has sent a message," Daku said, handing Naruto a small scroll. After Naruto looked at it with his glasses and read the short message, "Hand yourself over and no one gets hurt," he opened it. "Naruto, use your brain." Naruto crumpled up the paper and put it in his pocket. "I want Zabuza, Haku, Mole, and you to fight the ones on the ground to the west," he said, wincing when Deidara dropped a huge bomb right on top of the Lita's tower, but the electrical field protecting them caught it and set it off miles above them. "I'll take care of the ones in the sky. I hope you all have the Death Sharingan seal." Zabuza and Haku ran up to him and started walking with him. When he said this, 4 of the 6 people in the inner circle nodded their heads. "I'll take Kisame, we have a score to settle," Zabuza grunted as he cracked his knuckles. "Daku, you have Rai. You are the only one who can match her speed." "Hi Naruto-sama." They walked up to the gate, and the demon brothers bowed politely. They all looked far out to where the lightning field was stopping Kakuzu and Hidan. Kisame was shouting something at them and pointing to his sword, but the mad and electrocuted Jashinist was determined to use his 3-bladed scythe to cut through the barrier. Naruto opened his seal board and dropped it. The board stayed in place under him. "Don't hold back, you guys all know that, right?" "Hi Naruto-sama." They all said together. "Watch out. Kisame is using his sword to break through the barrier," he said as he jumped on his board and shot up into the sky to face Deidara and Sasori. While Daku and the others ran to meet the other members of the Akatsuki. Tobi and Zetsu stood in the shadows and watched.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.